I now welcome in person representatives from the Master Builders Association, Master Builders Australia and the Housing Industry Association. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, will you please state your full names and the capacity in which you'll be here today? Maybe if we start from the left, my left.
Simon Croft, the Housing Industry Association Chief Executive, Industry and Policy.
Thank you. Welcome.
Geordan Murray, Executive Director of Future Workforce at Housing Industry Association.
Elizabeth O'Grady, Master Builders Australia, National Manager of Industry Policy.
Thank you.
Alex Waldren, Master Builders Australia, National Director of Industry Policy.
Great, thanks very much. I now invite you each to make a short opening statement, and at the conclusion of any remarks, I'll invite members of the committee to ask questions.
The workforce needs of the housing industry are in the spotlight because of the housing affordability crisis and the Housing Accord's target of building 1.2 million homes over the next 5 years. There's been a couple of times in the past where residential building activity has reached the level of home building that is required by the National Housing Accord. However, each time it's resulted in critical labour shortages, which has resulted in build times blowing out and escalating construction costs. Higher build costs, longer build times create a lot of uncertainty for businesses in our industry and also for customers of the industry, so households. And with that uncertainty, it ultimately results in fewer new home sales and fewer new homes being built. There needs to be significant investment in developing the workforce of our industry if we're to have the best chance of achieving the Housing Accord's target of building 240,000 homes per year. As things stand at the moment, the industry doesn't have enough workers to build that number of homes. Increasing the industry activity to a level commensurate with the Accord's target without build times blowing out and seeing rising costs would require an additional 83,000 trades workers. This is around 22,000 carpenters, 17,000 sparkies, 12,000 plumbers, just to start with. And then on top of that, you've got painters, bricklayers, plasterers, roofers, tilers, floorers, the list goes on. And that's just the tradies. We've also got a lot of non-trade workers that the industry relies on. So to name a few, we've got designers, drafters, energy assessors, all which are equally important to new housing supply and all get their training through the vocational education system. The most likely source of getting all these additional workers that the industry needs is by training local workers and training the workforce locally. And no doubt this is why housing supply is recognised as a priority under the National Housing Agreement. But unlocking housing supply is an issue of national significance and it really will require a larger workforce. Given the urgency of addressing the housing affordability crisis, it makes sense to ensure that expenditure on vocational education is making the best possible contribution to achieving this outcome. We need to be making the best use of the VET system's capacity to train the industry's new workers, and it shouldn't matter whether that capacity is in TAFEs, private RTOs, industry RTOs or not-for-profits. The VET system has evolved over time and each of those different provider types plays a role in the system and the industry relies on the system working, the entirety of the system to train our workforce. A scheme that disproportionately favours one over the other is not likely to deliver the optimal outcome or the most efficient outcome. For example, only around 60 to 65% of construction trade apprentices do their trade school training at a TAFE, which means there's 35 to 40% of the training providers who are providing that training ineligible to offer fee-free training. In markets where students have the ability to choose between TAFE or a non-TAFE RTO, it's distorting student preferences. In markets where there are no RTO or no TAFE presence, or it really is really disadvantaging those students in those markets. Another significant concern is that fee-free TAFE scheme isn't delivering the workforce growth that the industry needs, at least from what we've seen over the last few years. During the time that the scheme has been running, we've seen the number of construction trades apprentices in training decline. And one of the reasons is that fee-free TAFE isn't supporting apprenticeships is because the cost of vet fees is not the biggest barrier to undertaking an apprenticeship. Under the Building and Construction On-Site Award, which covers most of the trade apprentices, the cost of course fees are covered by the employer, so making it fee-free doesn't provide any additional incentive for a student to undertake an apprenticeship. We recognise that some construction-related qualifications are eligible for the fee-free subsidy, and where the award doesn't apply, which is important. However, it just highlights that a one-size-fits-all policy approach isn't going to work to build the workforce that our industry needs. It also appears that the number of enrolments in construction-related qualifications under the scheme may be underrepresented relative to the other eligible courses when you consider the market share of the construction qualifications across the vet system. And I say it appears because there is a lack of data out there, and the fact that the scheme can cover everything from short courses, for example, the white card qualification, right through to diploma level qualification. So, you know, a white card qualification can be done in a day or a couple of days, right through to a diploma level course, which might take multiple years. The scheme covers all of those, so it's really difficult to get a gauge on what is actually being funded there. So, in conclusion, yeah, if the fee-free scheme is to become a permanent fixture of the vet system, it should be after a comprehensive review of this existing scheme and a commitment to ongoing performance evaluation. And Master Builders.
Yeah, hi, thanks for the opportunity to present to the committee. Like what HIA has said, you know, the construction industry faces the enormous task of building enough homes, commercial, community, utilities and transport infrastructure to meet increasing demand and growing population. Labour shortage is one of the biggest sources of the pressure in the industry at the moment. Bringing more apprentices into building and construction trades is an important way to relieve that pressure, and anything that can be done to ease the financial burden on Australian apprentices and bring more people to the industry is welcome. We know that many people are feeling the pinch of cost of living, and it's a huge pressure point for many, whether it be students or business. Master Builder strongly supports federal government funding into VET. It's a critical component to meet skills demands for our industry. That is why we support fee-free TAFE as one of a number of important funding mechanisms. But we're concerned that the proposed next step to legislate free TAFE is a step too far at this point in time, and we have two primary concerns. Our first concern is that free TAFE was introduced relatively recently, a couple of years ago, and we need more time to measure the performance of the initiative before legislating. There are still areas that need to be tested to determine how free TAFE adds to boosting apprentice commencements and completions. The free TAFE initiative has not increased apprentice numbers or held them steady since it was introduced 2 years ago. Not enough time has elapsed to evaluate a full cycle of learning for building and construction trades. For example, Certificate 4 is a 4-year construction program. We've only been 2 years into the free TAFE initiative. Nor is the data, you know, comprehensively available to support, you know, legislating the program at this point in time. The TAFE initiative so far has had the effect of reshuffling the deck from the RTOs to TAFE. Numbers for private RTOs have fallen from 33 to 30%. And increased by the same number from 60 to 63% for TAFE. Our other concern is that the legislation is going to restrict learning options and constrain competitiveness in the market at the expense of many of our member associations who run highly successful not-for-profit RTOs or are partners with TAFE in group training organisations. There are 6 non-profit RTOs and 4 GTOs in the Master Builders Network that deliver valuable industry-run, informed training across diverse courses and study types, including apprenticeships. Industry not-for-profit RTOs and GTO partnerships complement TAFE and add to industry and government collective efforts to lift the number of people completing apprenticeships and taking up careers in construction. We have instances at our member organisations where students have come to study at Master Builders RTOs because they could not get into TAFE in a timely manner. Similarly, TAFEs run semester enrolments, whereas some Master Builder RTOs can offer any time enrolment options to suit the students' needs. Some of our member associations have formal partnerships, as I've touched on before, with TAFE through the GTO model that connects up learning, student support and placements with construction businesses. Whilst the legislation appears to leave the door open for the bill to not be tied only to TAFE, we hold concerns about the intention of Clause 8.1 and the way other vet providers have been dealt with in that clause. The draft legislation makes an allowance for a proportion of financial assistance to other vet providers, but lacks clarity on which providers may qualify, nor what kind of course or student type would be eligible. An option to improve this is proportioning funding to industry not-for-profit RTOs in the construction industry, for example, given construction jobs are a priority for Australia's social and economic prosperity, and there's a strong case for priority. So there's a strong case for priority to be given to these training pathways. If this bill is to progress, the capacity for private not-for-profit industry-run RTOs to obtain a portion of the financial assistance is vital. Master Builders acknowledges the important role of TAFE, who in many instances partner with M.B.A. RTOs, as I've touched on already. And this is not an attack on TAFE. Instead, we are criticising the baking in of free TAFE when the performance of the initiative remains untested. The current shape of the draft legislation is likely to constrain market competition and limit student choices, and it's rushed and poorly drafted at this point in time. And that's our concluding opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Senator O'Sullivan.
Thank you. Thank you for those comprehensive opening statements. Can we get copies of that? Is that possible? Thank you. So I want to ask you the same question that I started off with the BCA. What's the most important thing that you need out of vocational training? Is it the quality of the education and the training that's and the outcome being, people qualified and meeting the needs of the jobs that you're providing, or is it who provided the training course? I think I know what the answer will be, but I'd love to hear it from you.
It's options. We've touched on it in our statement. I think, you need the training pathways, the different training pathways, because they complement each other, and you need the quality layer of the top. And the model that we've got for construction, building and construction, is tried and tested through non-for-profit industry RTOs and TAFE collaboration. So the two work well together. So I suppose what we're saying is, we support a free initiative, but we just think there needs to be a little bit more work to understand how effective that is or isn't in terms of commencements and completions. And I think the main point is completions before we jump to legislating. Yeah.
Would you care to add anything?
Yeah, I'd just add to that one is, the importance of vocational education in our industry, which is a hands-on practical industry in terms of that output is critical for us, and that's the vet system in setting that up is and as my colleague from Master Builders said, then the delivery of that, the completions is really important, and we do see through our own training that we do see higher completion rates through those industry delivered RTOs as well, that where it is have a wraparound support as part of it. So it does go hand in hand, as my colleague mentioned, but it just emphasises the importance for our industry of the vocational program.
Do you have any data on the difference of completion rates?
So,
Ms. Grady, you're nodding your head?
Yeah, we do at the Master Builders RTOs. We have a somewhat higher completion rate, but we can take that on notice and send it through if that would be helpful.
Thank you. Yep. Mr. Murray?
yeah, I was going to say, through our GTO, I think we know that we have a higher completion rate than directly indentured apprentices, and that was one of the findings that came out of the inquiry into apprenticeship incentives, was the much stronger performance of GTOs.
And can I ask about GTO? What impact has free TAFE had on enrolment numbers and completion and people participating in GTO?
It doesn't appear to have a material impact because, as I said, the
deleterious or
sorry,
no impact.
It doesn't appear to. There's no obvious impact there, primarily because the cost of training is covered by the award. So there's not an additional incentive there for an apprentice to undertake that. Initially, there were very few construction trades that were actually covered by fee-free.
But has the provider themselves, the RTO that's associated with the GTO, has it impacted upon the funding that they've received?
So the majority of our apprentices through our GTO go through TAFEs.
Okay.
So if it was a course that was eligible and the apprentice was eligible, presumably they would have taken up that opportunity.
Okay. And what about, so who represents like the what's it called? NECA? Or, yeah. Who represents the electrical and the plumber? Is it you guys?
Oh, no, it's NECA. But look, we've both got a sense of the full trade profile, essentially, because there's a bit of data that we look at, and we obviously work with those guys collectively. Back to your comment around, the change in commencements. I did touch on in my opening remarks, really, for RTOs, that there is a shift. You can see a 3% shift from RTOs, it looks like, out of RTOs and into TAFE.
TAFE, yeah.
It would remain steady, I'd say, for GTOs because they're connected to the TAFE network, but for RTOs that operate outside of a GTO, we're seeing that movement.
And so is it the agility of an RTO that's particularly appealing for your industry compared to the rigidity of a TAFE? And you mentioned enrolments being around semesters and the like. Is that sort of one of the fundamental problems or interest in ensuring that there's a more even playing field?
Yeah, I think, our RTOs, whether they're a GTO or not, really work quite cooperatively with TAFE, and I think they exchange information, provide collective support for students. So yes, the wraparound services that the two provide, are an important part of the ecosystem. I touched on in the opening remarks about the flexibility of the RTO network. We're not as rigid. We'll take people in, at different points in time in the year, whereas TAFE's a bit more rigid. So you complement each other in that sense. So you're sort of continuing the pipeline of apprentices coming through the system. And at the end of the day, the point is we need to be lifting the numbers of apprentices we, get through TAFE and RTOs. So we've got more workers out there in building and construction because we've consistently got a deficit of workers in our industry that we need to break the back of.
In terms of those wraparound supports, is there a difference in the capacity of a private training provider and TAFE to deliver wraparound supports in your experience and your members' experience?
From our member perspective, from our RTO network, GTO network, we have got builders and subcontractors and the like and trade professionals that are all, attached to our associations. So you've actually got, a natural, for want of another word, ecosystem there of the building and construction industry. So, you might have cases where a placement hasn't worked well with one business. And through our networks, we can look at, can we place this student in another placement with another business.
And that's the GTO
That's the
model,
GTO or the
yeah.
RTO model that has the advantages there over TAFE. Yeah.
I guess where I'm going there is has been through some of the questions and some of the comments from my colleagues here and certainly some of the answers we've received from those that are sort of TAFE only, if you like. They purport that TAFE is able to provide a better quality and more comprehensive wraparound support. Some of the pastoral needs, because some of the cohorts that Fee-Free TAFE is targeting might need additional support, some of those around those soft skills rather than just the hard skill uplifting that a vocational course might give. And so that TAFE it's been put to us that TAFE is able to provide better support. That's not my own experience. I've worked across this space for a long time. I've seen equally TAFE and private RTOs provide excellent level of support. In some cases, there's been deficiencies in both or in one or the other. So what's your experience?
I might just, for HIA, our main, in terms of our RTO, is delivery of the certificate for in building construction for people to get their builder's registration. And, we generally have quite smaller classes around that one and, have industry developed course delivered by industry experts around that also then, we bring in our technical experts that to keep people abreast of regulatory changes or give experiences from their sector, as well as that flexibility of being able to deliver that training, over time. So I think, through that program, and we have specific case officers looking after those to help them, support them through finishing their courses. I think through that wraparound support, we do get very positive feedbacks out of our students at the other side of that. So I think that's important when you're sort of trying to make an objective assessment of which one does better. And this isn't as it's not one versus the other. It's, they all have a role in that respect, and that's probably our key point.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that actually sums up what we're actually, certainly from the coalition's perspective, what we're looking for is flexibility for the students and the employers, and this narrowing it down to one particular, picking a winner if you like, and one particular type of provider is the issue. Do you think that? Do you think the government should be forcing students to go to TAFE over, and taking away that choice?
I think, Senator, it's hard enough to get people away from the whole university to get into doing vocational training and doing a trade, and we've been trying to navigate that for many, many decades around that stigma around doing a trade as a second-class career. So once we need to get over that in the first instance, and then the second part to that one is, the flexibility of how this is delivered, be it through, the TAFEs have a key role, and I've been a TAFE trainer myself and did many of my qualifications through TAFE. I've been a trainer for industry associations, and they all have a really critical role in this. And Mr. Murray mentioned, we're talking about 83,000 more workers that we need in our top 12 trades to reach those housing starts that we desperately need. So we need to look at a broad range of solutions to this issue.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to share the call. Tina Grogan.
Thank you. Couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Croft. Unlike the characterisation of my colleague, I don't think it's an either-or. I think it's having it all work together, as Mrs. Waldren, you so eloquently pointed out. And it is my understanding from our previous hearings that a number of the states are indeed directing fee-free TAFE funding to some of the private and community providers. Is your the organisations that you represent, are they delivering under that program? It's my understanding that they are in New South Wales.
There's a pilot in New South Wales that provides support for funding for that as well. It's a small pilot that they're testing in New South Wales, and our members are participating in that process, and it's progressing. I think there's a few administrative challenges in that, which doesn't mean it's not working. It's just administrative challenges and making it more streamlined and efficient and effective. But we've got some feedback from them on that. That's underway, and it's a work in progress. Yeah.
Cool. So your members are benefiting from the fee-free TAFE structure as it stands. I know they certainly are. Private and community RTOs are in South Australia, my home state. There's a bunch of programs that they're using the fee-free TAFE allocations to fund those private and community providers.
Oh, yeah, we're benefiting from the initiative at the moment, but our concern with the legislation at this point in time is the initiative has only had a couple of years to be tested. I touched on the New South Wales one. There's a bit of a pilot underway there, but in terms of a bit more of an employer incentive as well as the fee-free TAFE. Our view is that we actually need to have a better look at the 4-year cycle of a construction qualification to see how fee-free TAFE actually is performing before we lock in any legislation in that area. We've got the initiative underway. Keep it going, keep it progressive, look at how it performs, and if it works well going forward, let's do it then. But I think we need a bit more data, we need a bit more analysis around its performance in terms of adding to the outcomes, in terms of completions and more apprentices getting out into the construction, into construction careers.
Yeah, I can provide another example from within our training business. We operate a trade training centre in Darwin, and we've got capacity to train apprentices there, but there hasn't been any fee-free of that capacity eligible capacity within for us to deliver that. So we've got excess capacity to deliver trade training for for carpentry, but all the funding has gone to Charles Darwin.
Okay. You should probably talk to Charles Darwin and the state government and the territory government about what the pathway is into the future, because I think having all of the elements of the vet sector working together is the aim and is the answer. And with the wraparound services, you spoke about those wraparound services. Now, personally, I've worked in private RTO and community-based RTO. I've never worked in TAFE, but I love all three sectors. I think they all add something quite different. And given the skills crisis we've got, surely we need each of those to be working to their most capacity to get the right answer. Yeah. But what I think I'd be keen on your view. I'm well aware that there are some private RTOs and some community RTOs who provide wraparound services, but it's not consistent. Would you agree, or do you have a different view?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Within the private sector RTOs, there's a wide range of different businesses of different sizes and capabilities. So it's important that is recognised, that a small RTO that's delivering perhaps one course isn't going to have the same resources as a large TAFE institution. But there are very good larger vocational or private sector providers that do have that capacity that would be equal or better than a TAFE. So,
we have a couple in South Australia who do a spectacular job.
So it's important to recognise that not every TAFE has those resources either. There's smaller campuses that don't have all those facilities accessible to students that they would have in larger campuses. So so as I've said, I'm from South Australia. I spend most of my time in the regions in South Australia. We have a really good TAFE network that's coming back online, having been, gutted to a degree in previous times. And they provide services where there are no private providers. They're very limited community providers because they're small markets, and the private and the community providers choose not to embrace that. Hence why having a public provider in this country is a really important aspect. So there's a greater equity of delivery. Yeah. And I think that goes to your point that we need all parts of the system working collaboratively, because there are markets where it often doesn't make sense for private providers to compete with TAFEs, because TAFEs do have a competitive advantage because they've got capital resources that have been accumulated over time. It's very difficult to establish those toeholds in those in those markets where TAFEs are functioning well. But a lot of innovation does occur in those, or within the sector where TAFEs don't operate. So private providers see an opportunity within the market to deliver training in a segment of the market that's not being met by TAFEs. So, and that's where we need those RTOs to be delivering those services in areas where TAFEs are underservicing or unable to deliver the training.
I think just add to that one, Senator, is we do work closely with our TAFE colleagues. Just yesterday I met with the Melbourne Polytechnic Group, who have just been provided with some funding towards one of the new centres of excellence, and about trying to shape that. And I know our Master Builders colleagues do something similar. So we do work very collaboratively and do some research with them over the time. So again, it's that coordinated approach, I think, is what we're trying to emphasise.
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit further as well, on the previous question that you raised, just around the differences between the two. I think coming back to the system all working together, in my opening remarks I touched on, you have got a clause in your draft legislation that touches on, in the clause 8, other vet providers being sort of eligible. We're asking, if you're looking at that, just a little bit more detail and a bit more definition around what that looks like would be helpful. You've got part of the workings there to include the whole system in your legislation, but it's not quite there yet. So that's our point around that. You could enhance that to improve that provision. And then the other respect, I touched on the data as well. It's the data that is the challenge, and going back to looking at a 4-year window on the performance of the the fee-free TAFE initiative and test that before you lock in legislation. Yeah.
Because, of course, the fact that it's free doesn't change what TAFE's doing. Do you know, it's just that they're not paying fees to attend.
Yeah.
I think with this extra places going towards fee-free to enable people who cannot afford to train and who would not be training if they did not have access through this pathway. It's the idea of the legislation is to lock that in. It's to lock that in a way that makes sure it survives into the future, because we know, and we've heard plenty of evidence about some of the approaches by different governments into the provision of training and the provision of TAFE. And, you know, at the risk of being a little overtly political here, the Liberal Party have made it very clear that they don't support the free TAFE. And Mr Dutton has clearly stated that he'll cut what he doesn't like, but won't tell us what it is. So you can assume that TAFE is probably on his list. So is that not an argument to protect the training industry, to protect TAFE? And as I say, we know in South Australia, I know just because I'm from South Australia, that there is a proportion of that money that is going to the privates and the communities. Therefore, when we're looking at a skills crisis, having a locked and loaded number of places that are going to go on into the future. Now, obviously, there will be evaluations. Obviously, NCVER will report on the data. They only do it every 4 years, and adjustments will be made, a bit like the program you were talking about, Mrs. Waldren, where it's a trial, it's a test with some of the private providers that you can adjust over time, improve, etc. Do you see that as a valuable commitment and having that consistency and knowing that into the future you've got that sustainable level of places going into the training system?
Our concern is with the way it's drafted now is there's still a bit of risk in there in terms of movement of people out of the RTO network into the VET network, and that's not a good outcome for the industry because we
need to grow the number of
we need all
people.
arms pushing outcomes, right? So our concern is there, and that's why we keep saying we need to look at how this is progressing over the 4 years first, work out where the problems are before we legislate and make sure we get the legislation right, so we're not creating unintended consequences in legislation that's, you know, rushed and drafted, you know.
So would you propose that we stopped and waited for the 2 years?
We'd suggest yes, make sure you've got, you know, a proper period to measure and test before you actually lock in the legislation, because you don't want to create something. You don't want to lock in something now that potentially is going to, you know, undermine the whole initiative and growth and outcomes for construction careers. So that's where we're coming from, and we have put in in the opening remarks there. I mean, you could actually, and I've said this before, you could actually, you know, amend your legislation a little bit to be more inclusive.
So would you
of the RTO
would you support
network.
the legislation if it included that?
We'd be happy to look at it, but I think we also need something around completions and how that's performing, because the main priority is to get more people out into construction careers, and this is not telling us at the moment that that's delivering on that.
So I've got a million more questions, but I'm getting the wind up here. So I will just say that what we did here in South Australia was that people were going into the courses, but then because of the enormous skills shortage that we have in this country, they were then going into apprenticeships or they were going into jobs before finishing their courses, and that can't be a bad thing. Anyway, I have more questions.
Senator Brockman.
Thank you. So what we're really talking about today is whether we pass this legislation which locks in a particular pathway as opposed to keeping all options on the table. When it comes to funding skills, if I, as a government, allocate $1 of funding courses into an RTO versus a TAFE, how much further does that tax dollar go with your organisations?
employer incentives, are proven to assist the process. They're not there. They're not there now, and they do actually offset the cost of the employer setting aside the time to work with the student. So we'd have to say yes, that's a really strong initiative and something we continue to support. And we know that's the vet review process has looked at, the apprentice review process has looked at that, and there's been no decisions on that. But we would say those kind of incentives have always worked. There are some flowing through to states at the moment and are working. We would encourage that to continue. But in terms of if you're giving a benefit to TAFE, you'd need to be giving an equivalent benefit to an RTO to be seeing the benefit spread evenly throughout the system.
Yes, so in both our opening remarks, we both talked about a holistic approach to addressing the skills challenges in the country. When we put our submission together, the main platform that the government had been talking about was the fee-free TAFE. We were talking around this one that we need a holistic approach to addressing skills, not just fee-free TAFE. We need to look at employer incentives. We need to look at the apprentice incentives. We need to do, retention. We need a holistic approach to this. We know subsequent to this that there has been a few announcements about the apprentice incentive, and we have now had the review handed down and 300 pages and 34 recommendations that we're all working our way through. So I think, again, this is where it comes back to we need to look at addressing the skills much broader than where the conversation has been primarily about fee-free TAFE around it, whereas we want to be talking about pre-apprenticeship programs, job-ready programs, all of these sort of things, new and innovative skills to complement our existing skills, getting our construction trainers. We need all of this to be working concurrently. The employer incentives is critical around this one. If we don't have the employer, we don't have any apprentice. So again, it's probably that holistic approach that we haven't really seen coming out of the policy debate around this one. We've seen increments here or something over here rather than that holistic approach that we've been asking for, and we put into our budget submissions, and we'll be talking ahead of elections about where we'd like both parties to be focusing.
And just to add to that, I suppose it comes down to the efficiency of the operation really and the value of the taxpayer's dollar in that. So if you've got a more efficient operation, you've got less administration challenges, you've got less complexity in the process, there'll be a better outcome for the taxpayer dollar if we're looking on, where that, value proposition lies in terms of the government's investment. But, you'd have to look pretty closely and dig deeper into that. And that's why we say, learn lessons from pilots, for example, in New South Wales, where they say there's a few inefficiencies occurring at the moment, and give ourselves time to test how a full cycle of a building diploma, for example, has fared under the free vet initiative, which then comes back to the point of it's probably premature to introduce the legislation now. We're not saying, you might do it sometime down the track, but it's probably premature to do that now because you just need some more analysis, intelligence, information around the performance of the initiative. So
if we pushed pause button on this legislation, as your organisations are recommending it, which, to be very, very clear, does not stop the government pursuing its policy. Its policy is there at the moment without this legislation. What would you like to see the government, a government of either persuasion, do in terms of the training space? Are there particular areas that we should be focusing on?
I guess, it comes down to there's a number of issues that the government within this policy are aiming to achieve, whether it's to overcome the cost barrier that some students face. Not all students face. Cost isn't a barrier for every student, but it is certainly a barrier for some, and you want to see that barrier overcome. Is it to accelerate workforce growth? To get more people in, or is it to increase the participation of cohorts that are typically underrepresented in these workforces? It's trying to tick a lot of boxes. So, we'd like to see workforce growth prioritised from our perspective, our members would like to see more workers out there in industry able to work, so with qualifications as quickly as possible. Yeah. So we'd probably argue that those other two priorities are secondary, but that's the decision for the government as to where they prioritise those things that's going to deliver the best value for money for the investment. So it's a challenging thing to tick all of those boxes with one policy measure.
Just to build on my colleague's comment, sorry, Senator, that was, for us to be able to get the actual tradies coming through the door, which we're seeing the dropout rates and, the drop-off in apprentice numbers, so programs that we've seen, a lot of this has gone towards the Cert 4 in building and construction or Cert 4 in training and assessment, really important. But for us, in terms of trying to get those 83,000 more tradies, job-ready programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, those are they're the ones that would really help with bringing the tradies in the door, those brickies that, in short supply, the concreters, those real trade-specific, that's where we probably think this legislation could be more targeted to those key areas like that, and sort of potentially, funneling some of the funding to this one towards those sort of really high demand sort of priority areas like that is something that we probably think could be more nuanced in the legislation going forward.
So just a couple more from me, Chair.
Senator, can I add to just that
question?
question?
Oh, yeah, please, go ahead.
Just a couple of things. The apprentice review has been a very comprehensive process, really good consultation on that, and that give the government credit for that. 34 recommendations in that, some of them have been announced. There's a few in there that still could be announced. I touched on that before, incentives for employers, which have been in place in the past, and we're under the coalition government as well. So I think that has worked well. Our members continue to ask for that support, and then that comes back to, assisting the mentor process and the wraparound services process. There's also a measure in that around GTOs, I think more incentives for GTOs. That's an example, as we keep talking about, of TAFEs and private providers working well together, providing wraparound services. They're really important parts, of the training system, and I think focus on those areas, support those areas. Fee-free TAFE is a part of that as well.
The Chair's giving me the wrap-up, so I think this will probably be my last question. Just to the housing industry, you said in your submission that, and I quote, during the time that free TAFE scheme has been operating, the number of apprentices and trainees in the construction industry has declined. It doesn't appear that the scheme has been doing enough to boost participation. Again, reflecting on that quote, is this where you say you need a much more holistic approach to training across the industry in order to achieve successful outcomes?
Yes, exactly. That's the point that we were trying to make there. This policy, it could potentially be great. We don't know because we don't have the data, but we know that it's from what we see of apprenticeship participation during this period, it doesn't appear to be giving us the acceleration in workforce growth that we need if we're going to build that 1.2 million homes over the next 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Chair.
Senator Grogan, 2 minutes.
Just on that, of course, this policy isn't just about the building industry. It's about the industries that are in need. And of course, state by state, those negotiations are had with the state governments about what they wish to apply it to based on what they need in the state. So to put it in the legislation I would argue, be unhelpful in terms of leaving it with a framework to guarantee those 100,000 places each year, but allow the states to determine what their priorities are. But the talk of workforce growth, adding this in and targeting, as you said, Mr. Murray, those cohorts that find barriers to entry is about broadening the workforce. It's about bringing more people in because we have a crisis here of skills and we need to increase the number of people coming into the system, coming into training and going into industries like yours and like other service industries where we know we have significant gaps. So essentially what this policy is doing is it's not there to fix the housing crisis. It's there to bring different cohorts that currently have barriers to entry Are you supportive of that as a concept?
Yeah, I think overcoming those barriers, yes, yeah. But in terms of creating the additionality to the workforce and accelerating workforce growth, there may be other programs that could deliver greater value.
Oh, I would definitely say that there are other things to be solved by other policies, absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah,
but this isn't like the,
it comes,
only
comes
thing
from a frustration that
in the
whenever
toolkit.
we've spoken about labour force shortages and we've heard ministers respond, they've always cited fee-free TAFE as being the solution to that workforce challenge within the construction industry, and it doesn't appear to be hitting the mark.
So just really quickly,
Very quick one with a quick response. Thank you.
You say that there's it's impacting your numbers in terms of training, but NCVER data from 2023, which is the first and sort of peak year, the biggest year of free TAFE, do you know what the increase in government money to independent RTOs was in 2023? No. It was 10.9, and for public providers it was only 9.6. So it's just clarifying, are you saying that you feel you're being squeezed when in actual fact at the peak of the free TAFE, the increase in funding to private and independent RTOs was higher?
And so that's all sectors. It's not specifically building and construction.
I don't have the breakdown, no.
So I think you'd have to have the breakdown from the sector. I don't have that at my fingertips. I don't know if you guys have got that at your fingertips as well.
No.
But yeah, there has been a lot of investment in the aged care sector, for example. So I think you'd need to look at that from a sector by sector perspective.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and then that also comes back to, again, what are the priority areas of workforce need, and building and construction is front and centre in all government priorities, I think. On that
Absolutely,
front.
yeah. But the challenge being, of course, it's not the only one.
We are past a lot of time, and when the chair comes back, if I'm not on time, I'll be in trouble. So, look, can I thank you? Can I thank you all very much indeed for your time today? If you've taken any questions on notice, could you please return the answers to the Secretariat by Friday, the 21st of February? I thank you and enjoy the rest.